Good morning. I just want to talk a little bit about an upgrade I did on my iMac. It's an older machine, iMac 27-inch, mid 2011. That's what they call it. Came with a 2.7 gigahertz Core i5 processor. So at this point, it's a dated machine. And it also came with it came with 4 gig of RAM, I'm sorry. So I was at a crossroads. I could spend a bundle of money to buy a newer iMac 27-inch, which I like. It's a nice machine, pretty much bulletproof. Or I could try to get some more performance out of this one. There's nothing wrong with the machine, but in using programs like Adobe Photoshop, a digital audio workstation that I use, it was becoming slow to open those programs. They're memory hogs. So I thought I would spend a little bit of money and upgrade the machine. And I'm not going to go into step-by-step details on how to do it. So if that's what you're looking for, this isn't the place. But I just want to talk a little bit about my experience in what I did to upgrade it and how difficult I found it. So the first thing I decided that I probably should do is upgrade the RAM. And I did. And I bought some RAM from Newegg. The maximum this machine will hold is 16 gig. And so I bought some from Newegg for $65. They have some pretty good resources on that site to make sure that you're buying exactly the right RAM for your machine. So I replaced the RAM. There's a port on the bottom of the machine. That's a straightforward job. I would strongly suggest that you use ESD protection when you do it. Get yourself a wristband and make sure you're grounded so that you don't damage these electronics. It's a matter of opening a little port on the bottom of the iMac and taking out the old RAM and inserting the new RAM. 16 gigs is the max. So that was the first thing I did, and I found an amazing difference in loading time for my memory hog programs and things like web browsers, production things like Word, Excel, that type of thing. So I was pretty happy with that, but then I got thinking, well, what else can I do to wring a little bit more out of this? I think 2012, I think, is when I got it. So an 8-year-old machine. So I decided, well, let's try a solid-state drive upgrade. I only have used about 25% of the 1 terabyte drive that it came with. So I'm thinking solid-state drive, I'll get much more speed out of it. It should be reliable, and I can always use it later if I get another machine. So I decided on a 1 terabyte solid-state drive upgrade, 6G on the speed, which is 600 megabits per second. I had to buy a bundle to do this because in order to replace the hard drive in an iMac like this one, it requires taking the front glass off and removing the actual screen. I it is a little bit of a job, but the kit I bought with the drive, made by OWC, it's the entire kit is $158 on Amazon. Comes with a couple of suction cups to pull the glass off the front of the iMac. That glass is only held on there by some magnets, so that's pretty straightforward. Then you have to take out 8 screws. They're Torx screws, and they send you screwdrivers to fit them. I would recommend, if you have a Torx driver with a bigger handle, that you use that, because the ones they give you have handles that aren't very big in diameter, so you don't get much torque, no pun intended, when you're loosening or tightening screws. I would also suggest that you buy yourself something to magnetize the screwdriver with, because in putting these screws back in, there are magnets near them, and if you're not careful, the screws will stick to those magnets, which are part of the machine. They're what hold the glass on the front. You don't want that happening. So magnetize your Torx driver if you're going to do this. Also ESD protection, obviously. So when you get to the point where you're taking the screen out, it's nice to have somebody else there, because there are 4 connectors behind the screen that connect the screen to the actual electronics of the machine, and they need to be disconnected. And it's nice to have somebody hold that screen while you're doing it. Also, don't touch the screen. They tell you that, because you can leave fingerprints on it, which you don't want. The actual changing of the hard drive, very straightforward. OWC has some great, and I repeat, great videos on their website that'll give you step-by-step instructions on how to do this. I would highly recommend you watch them a couple of times and have them near you when you do it. So this hard drive upgrade, a little more work. I'd say it took me an hour or so with the help of another person to hold things and help me. But it's very doable. I'm no electronic whiz, although I did work with electronics years past. So that was the next thing I did. And this is very important. You need to back up your machine before you do this, obviously, because you're going to reload your backup onto the new drive. There's about 19 ways to do this. The way I chose was to do a complete backup using Apple's Time Machine, and then put the new drive in, and then when you boot the machine up with the new drive, you make sure that the Time Machine drive is plugged into the USB port or whatever port you have it in, and follow their instructions. And it's very easy to restore from the Time Machine. It'll do the operating system and everything. Plan on it taking at least a couple of hours because this old machine is USB 2. But once it booted up, once it came back up, had no issues with it. I had to log back into my Apple account. I had to log back into my administrator login account, and that's about it. The machine worked flawlessly, and again, I noticed a substantial increase in performance on the machine. Now, while I was going through this process, I realized that USB 2 is my bottleneck at that point. And so I decided I'd take one more step. And that's to buy an adapter. This machine has a Thunderbolt port. which has tons of speed. So I bought an adapter. It's made by Canex. It's called a Thunderbolt to USB 3 adapter. It's $76. Yeah, it's a lot of money, yes. But doing that increases your USB speed by, well, it's 10 times faster, let's put it that way. And I noticed a huge difference in the amount of speed it took to do backups after that point. Now, if you're going to have it, this adapter only gives you one USB port. So I also bought a powered USB hub, USB 3, by Atola. It's a 7-port hub. That's $26. Very easy to connect these things. They're plug and play. They work flawlessly as far as I can see. The total I've got into this is $325 plus my time. Now you can say, well, something might break in there tomorrow, and you'd be right. But these machines are pretty much bulletproof. I'm hoping I can wring a few more years out of it, and at that point I can reuse that drive that's in there as an external drive, pick up a bay for it. So if you want to increase the performance of your iMac vintage mid-2011, it's an iMac 27-inch, I would highly recommend these things. It's not that hard to do. Tons of resources online to show you step by step. My advice, go for it. Thanks for listening.